and welcome. It's another Confessions podcast from your friends at BBC Radio 2. Yes, it's another audio array of pretty terrible tales, really, from the very sinful Radio 2 listener. And let's be honest, you're one of those as well. Anyway, they're all after a little bit of forgiveness from the Caring Collective. This week we have a poorly Paris pooch. We have a smelly, sweet surprise. That's S-U-I-T-E. A barking best friend brouhaha. And a dodgy door drama. All coming up right now. All lined up and ready to go. So who is this? Who are we saying this is from? It's from Mike. Thank you, Mike. Dear cher Père Simon et les team tolérants.
Oh, I say.
I write this confession as I travel back to the city in which this incident took place. I must announce this confession in order to shed the burden that prevents me from walking down Rue de Sèvres without shivering at the memories of my actions, or rather, reactions. I'm in my third year of study of international politics at a university, the only decent one in South Yorkshire. One of the perks of my university is their study abroad scheme, which I was keen to take advantage of. Happily and absurdly, given my effort at an exam results, my university offered me a place to study in the French capital, at the famous politics school in the wealthy area of Saint-Germain-des-Prés. Living in Paris is obviously very expensive, and I sought to earn some money while I studied. And soon enough, I found a job house-sitting for a fairly elderly lady of enormous wealth, pomp, and waistline. This was matched in size only by her generosity and humour. She regularly ventured out of Paris to see friends or visit her vineyard in southern France.
Wow.
How do you find this kind of work?
Yeah.
And on such occasions, I would be summoned to occupy her beautiful two-floor apartment close to the banks of the Seine. Nice job.
Yeah.
Anyway, one weekend, Madame Beaujolais, as I called her, asked me to house and dog sit while she again went on a jolly to southern France. She would normally have taken her dear dog with her, but the elderly hound was under the weather, and Madame Beaujolais didn't want to stress poor Thibault with a trip across the country. I'm not sure of the breed. It was big, grey, and trotted around around the house like a small, well-behaved horse. I was left with strict instructions as to how to care for the brute. As an extra thank you, Madame Beaujolais had left a case of the best wine I will ever have. I have more cases at my vineyard. You must have as much as you like, my dear boy.
Oh, Inspector Poirot.
Thank you very much. She cooed as she kissed me goodbye on the Friday morning. I say. Not wanting to disappoint Madame Beaujolais, who had become a sort of grandmother figure to me, I attentively looked after Thibault. I wedged the tablets from the vet into Thibault's dinner of, and this is true, tinned foie gras for dogs. After our respective dinners, I spent the evening sitting on the couch by the window of the ornate lounge. The great dog lay next to me, snuggled in a designer tartan blanket, his head resting on my lap. The scene was surreally picturesque and pleasant. Thibault and I were content. Around 1 o'clock, I slurred a good-night dog to Thibault and retired to my bedroom. I woke late, as Thibault had not come to urge me to take him outside as he normally did. "Thibault!" I called as I collected his lead and my coat.
Oh, no.
I'd take him round the Jardin de Luxembourg for a morning stroll and pick up some croissants for breakfast, but there was no answer. "Thibault!" I called a little more tentatively. No answer. Well, I found Thibault lying as I had left him, curled up in the blanket. But like the flames he had laid down next to, he had died in the night. At first, as you can imagine, I was gutted. Then I began to consider the practicalities of my situation. Why did this have to happen now? How would I explain to Madame Beaujolais that her loyal chien had died whilst in my care? Well, she'd left me a number for the vet, whom I called to explain my predicament. "Ah, we're so sorry, monsieur."
Okay.
They remembered Madame Beaujolais' visit to pick up the medicine, and they knew Thibault. I was asked to bring the dog to the vets to obtain a certificate of death. It's because he's a pedigree dog, and so therefore it all has to be done properly.
Well done. Yep.
Perhaps it was the wine I consumed leading me to not think properly, but when confronted with the task of taking a dead dog to the vets, I drew a blank. Naturally, I thought the best idea would be to pack him into a suitcase and wheel him along, because it wasn't too far. After all, why are you looking
Obviously,
past?
that's
Yes,
the first thing.
That's the first thing
I'd think of, yeah.
Shortly into the journey, the immense weight of the dog became too much, and I decided to take the metro, a couple of stops closer to the vet. After struggling through the barriers and down the stairs, I heaved the dead dog into a carriage.
Oh, no.
Visibly sweating and panting, I collapsed onto a seat. When confronted with a large flight of stairs at the other end of the metro, it is not unreasonable to say that I lost it just a little bit. Do you need help, mon ami? Two men had come to my aid. Why they're speaking in English, I have no idea.
Nice.
I imagine we got a translation here. Two men had come to my aid, seeing me drag, quite literally, this dead weight up the stairs, while swearing in ways I never thought I could. Oh oui, merci vraiment, merci, I say, and they hoisted my bag up the stairs. It was much more manageable between the two of them. At the top of the stairs, the two men did not stop. They did not give me back the large suitcase.
Excellent.
Instead, they sprinted off as fast as two people carrying a dead hound in a suitcase could. They were thieves. For a second, I stood paralysed in shock, and then I chased after them as I shouted, "Arrête, arrête!" Almost immediately, they were lost in the crowds on the Parisian streets. I stood feeling like Inspector Clouseau, hopelessly underqualified to chase down these accidental dog thieves. Soon I had to come to terms with the fact that I had been the target of a crime normally reserved for new tourists. The two thieves will offer to help someone struggling up with a suitcase and then make off with the contents. Well, 3 mortifying phone calls and a trip to the police station later, I sat waiting apprehensively for Madame Beaujolais. I had another glass of her very fine wine just to calm the nerves. I explained the full story to Madame Beaujolais. She was remarkably calm and accepting of the situation, perhaps because of her 3 philosophy degrees and disinterested attitude towards death. "My boy," she said.
Because she's now from southern states of America.
She said, no.
Boy.
She said as I stood waiting in the doorway to leave, "Sometimes the strangest and most absurd things happen. It is these things you must look for because they are the things that make life what it is. Just a little amusing." And with a hearty laugh, she thanked me again for my help. She confessed that she found the thought of 2 thieves opening the suitcase to find her deceased dog hilarious. They probably thought they would get a laptop or something. Ha! It was maybe the best way for Thibault to go. After all, she says, well, what an extraordinary woman. I like the sound of her. So, Father Simon and everyone, I must ask forgiveness from Madame Beaujolais for my inability to care for her dog. And I suppose from her dead dog for the same. If it's any help, I promise the listeners I will never take ownership of a pet for as long as I live. Well, who'd have thought it? An interesting kind of sitcom moment there as you try and take... And the thing is, he did everything right. He didn't try and... It wasn't his fault. He was an elderly dog. The dog had been poorly. He was trying to do the right thing. Sister Rebecca...
Yeah, he didn't replace it and pretend that nothing had happened.
No, I don't think
like
that would
when
have
you
worked.
look after a goldfish. I think she's an amazing woman, Madame Beaujolais, isn't she? So she sounds really great. And, I mean, obviously she saw something in Mike. Otherwise she wouldn't have let him house sit for her and given him all this wine. So I guess Mike, yeah, as you said, he did the right thing. It does sound like a made-up story. So the fact she also believed him is credit to her. And I think the 2 guys who took the suitcase, it serves them right. So all in all, great story, and I'm forgiving.
I wonder if Madame Beaujolais might actually leave her apartment to Mike. I reckon that might happen at some stage later on. Anyway, Sister Bobby, what are you making?
Yeah, fabulous story. I wonder actually if Madame Beaujolais actually knew the dog was at his last innings and just couldn't face it, so she kind of went away because it would have been too upsetting. It may have been an idea. Put him in a suitcase is a really good idea. I hadn't thought of that. As long as it's watertight, of course, that makes sense.
What would be the right thing? If you've got to take a dead dog to the vet?
Well, if you don't have your own vehicle, you're right, you have to do something, and you can't put it in a... I mean, look, with all due
Taxi?
respect to the dog, he died, he had a lovely life,
Had
peaceful
foie gras, for
death.
heaven's sake.
But, peaceful, he was loved, he was on the chaise lounge, he had view of the Seine, it's anything a dog could want.
That's right,
with
'cause
due
all
respect
dogs
to the
want
dog,
that, don't they?
with due respect to the dog was okay. The joke really is on the robbers. Cops and robbers, and you are forgiven, and what a great story.
The dog was okay, apart from the fact the dog died. But anyway,
Yeah, but he didn't die a horrible death. He died in his
that's
sleep.
true. What a way to
Yes,
go!
what a way
Wrapped
to
in
go
a blanket.
on the banks of the Seine. No one's going to feel sorry for the thieves here because we obviously don't feel sorry for them. But all I want to know is I lived in Paris for about 6 months, and I want to know where this Madame Beaujolais is because when I was living there and I had no money, I was sharing a room with a bloke from Eritrea, and it was just me and him in this and it was a dreadful part of Paris, and so I want to know where Madame Beaujolais had an amazing apartment with all her wine is.
What a job! What an extraordinary job!
That is outstanding. So, yes, very existentialist, Madame Beaujolais. I am going to definitely forgive.
Tonight's confession, it's got written on here. If you're eating, can you read out a warning, please, Simon? So anyway, there'll be some that there might be some people who think, really, did you have to? So I'm just saying, if that's the way you're feeling,
It's
then
always a good sign, though, this, I think.
I
when we
have
get that at
taken
the
out
start.
a lot from this.
Oh, yes.
I've taken out an awful lot, and there will be silences as we go through with the gaps. Comes from Paul. Thank you very much, Paul. Dear Father Simon and ye olde crew, I was the 22-year-old deputy manager at a 4-star hotel on the south coast of England. It was Goodwood Week in 1972 and the hotel was full of wealthy racegoers. The general manager of the hotel had gone to Southampton for the weekend and I was in charge. It was 1 o'clock on a Saturday afternoon and the maintenance man had finished duty for the weekend and left at midday. This is the information that you need to know, as when I got to reception I was told that there was a blocked toilet in one of the suites where there was a cocktail party in full swing with about 40 revellers. Why are you looking puzzled, Matthew?
I just had something race through my mind.
It's almost certainly correct.
Yeah.
The hotel had recently purchased a device called a jet plumber, which resembled a pneumatic drill with a big rubber collar at the bottom. Although it had not yet been tried, I had examined it with the maintenance man when it arrived, read the instructions, had a fairly good idea of how it worked.
Yeah.
The basic idea was that there was a slot in the main body into which you placed a canister of compressed air. And when you depressed the handles, the compressed air expanded and sent the blockage down the pipes at a considerable speed.
Nothing can go wrong with that.
Absolutely
That sounds fabulous. Yes, it'll be fine.
So having had the call, I confidently collected the jet plumber from the maintenance department and set off for the suite with the problem. The host of the cocktail party was very impressed that a member of management had arrived in full morning suit, black jacket, striped trousers and silver tie, what with it being Goodwood and everything, to resolve his lavatorial problem. There was considerable interest from the partygoers as I assembled the jet plumber in the ensuite facilities. I approached the offending toilet with what I hoped was an air of authority.
Okay.
Big
Pause.
gap.
Yeah.
I positioned the jet plumber as indicated in the operating manual, inserted the canister of compressed air, and after asking the spectators to stand well back, depressed the handle. As if by magic, the entire contents of the toilet disappeared in an instant, accompanied by cheers from the audience, which had grown considerably. I was very proud that my efforts had been so well received, but was somewhat disturbed by a high-pitched howling noise that seemed to be coming from the bedroom next door.
Yeah.
What I had not appreciated was that the waste pipes were arranged in pairs, sharing a common downpipe where apparently the blockage was lodged. The contents of the toilet had departed at speed, hit the blockage and hurtled back up the other pipe into the toilet in the adjoining suite. Unfortunately, the occupant of the other suite had been sitting there on the throne, reading a broadsheet newspaper.
Silence.
So, gap. I had not been trained to deal with this scenario, says Paul, but I had to face the music, and so I knocked on the door, which was opened by a man who, and I've changed this to, who was very unhappy.
Yeah.
In fact, he looked very shocked and very angry. There were howls of laughter from next door, which did little to diffuse the situation, added to which I had lost the power of speech. So I would like to sincerely apologise to the unfortunate resident who, although not charged for his stay, vowed that he would never return to the hotel again, which I have to say, given Paul's description, which he gave me of this guy when he opened the door, I would understand completely. Paul, I'm now 65 and aboard a sailing boat that I live on currently in Crete with my wife Jill, who was a receptionist at the said hotel at the time of the unfortunate event. Anyway, you kind of knew which way this story was going, and as soon as we had a blocked toilet and a jet plumber with compressed air. Anyway, who'd have thought... How can you tell that it's just going to go next door and the guy was just sitting there quite happily and quite innocently when all of a sudden... Well, that was unfortunate. What do we think, Sister Rebecca?
Well, I mean, I don't know exactly what happened, but you can imagine
guess.
that there'd be some serious damage involved with the other person.
Well, it's not serious. Just
possibly.
as much as
Well,
just
what about the bullet of air? I mean, what about that
No,
thing?
it
Where did
wasn't.
that go?
We don't need to go into too much detail.
Anyway,
just a shower was fine.
Really, lawyers would have been involved in this day and age. I mean, they were lucky. Paul was lucky to get away with not being sued, don't you think? But I think it was obviously different times.
Yes.
If he'd done it these days, he probably would have ended up in a court. But because
Why do you think he's on a sailing boat off Crete?
different times, therefore I'm going to forgive.
Mr. Bobby, what do you make of all that then?
Well, the problem is, of course, you've got a bit of the information and you read the instructions, but you don't know the full situation. I mean, he could have just put a call into the handyman and said, look, any thoughts on this? Just because I'm just about to do this, and that would have been a safer approach. But, of course, what you're trying to do is save the situation, so I understand that doesn't come out as kind of obvious, maybe. What he's really, really lucky with is that there was someone just sitting. Something I'm thinking of all other scenarios.
What else would he be doing?
It could have been worse, actually. It could have been worse. It could have been a smaller human being. There could have been a hole in the ceiling as well. When you think of the explosive nature...
What?
Well, think about it, yeah?
Okay.
Explosive nature, you're on a seat. It's like an ejector seat, isn't it? There could have been a hole in the ceiling as well.
I don't think there was that much compressed air.
That's quite a lot of force. Anyway, look, it's one of those things where the intention was all good.
Yes.
And you were very, very, very lucky. It was different times. You're forgiven.
Brother Matthew.
I can't be alone in thinking I need to get my hands on one of these jet plumbers. They sound like enormous fun. I obviously, it's bad enough what happens to this gentleman on the loo. And it must have been even worse when it happens and then he hears a loud cheer from the room next door. So it feels as if it's deliberate. But I think what we're overlooking here is what on earth is the manager of this hotel doing going on holiday during Goodwood?
Yes.
It's the busiest time for this hotel, and off he trots, leaving his deputy in command. So basically, I'm going to forgive, because really the hotel manager should have been there to deal with the jet plumber and all the other
So
stuff.
it's the general manager's fault.
It's the manager's fault. I think
really.
we can all agree.
Not the deputy manager.
Yes, definitely not his fault.
Gather round, here's another drive time confession. This one comes from Sarah. Thank you very much indeed for tonight's tale. Father Simon and the Sisters of Mercy. By the way, there's a mosh in an hour. I seek forgiveness for the trauma I imposed upon a teacher/invigilator and my fellow students. My tale begins many moons ago in 1989, and I now feel it's time I owned up to this. I was in my final year at a Sunderland Polytechnic, now called a university, so I too will call it a university. At the time, I lived in a shared house in a highly salubrious area of Sunderland, just a few houses along from a chapter of Hell's Angels. I was a skint student, and beggars can't be choosers. My housemates were Paul, Sally and Nicola. No surnames to protect the innocent. Paul was a 6 foot, 6.5 inch hockey player who had a friend called Aaron, who lived a few doors down. Aaron had brought his dog to university. Now, instantly you go, why? Why would anyone, unless you absolutely had to, why would you take a dog to university? Anyway, this dog was a white and light brown, scruffy, wiry-haired terrier of medium size by the name of Benji. Benji was a little cutie, says Sarah, and we soon became good friends. Aaron, of course, took full advantage of my love for Benji, and I would often come home from lectures, or the pub, or shopping, and find Benji in my room, waiting expectantly for a walk. At odd times, my bedroom door would open and the little dog would jump onto my bed, expecting tummy rubs. Sometimes I'd wake up with him there. I suspect that Paul had given Aaron a front door key, to be perfectly honest. Anyway, luckily for Aaron, I could not resist Benji's big brown eyes. The day before one of my final exams, Aaron asked to borrow my car to jumpstart his. So I handed in my keys, too busy revising at the last minute to drive my car the few feet over to his house. The next morning, my car was back outside my house, the keys in the kitchen. Now, Nicola and I had the same final exam, and we jumped into my car to drive to the university, but it would not start. The battery was as dead as a dead parrot in a Python sketch. I ran over to Aaron's house and said, what have you done? What have you done to my car? You've got to take us to university. It's our exam. He informed us that he'd actually drained my battery trying to start his, and both cars were now out of action. He decided not to mention it and had pushed my car back along the street to my house, leaving the keys in the kitchen and tiptoeing out.
Oh.
Nice friend, huh? Few choice words later, and stifling the very real urge to deck him, Nicola and I realised that we had about 1.5 miles to run to get to our exam, and we were going to be very late. With a scream of realisation, we set off running. I was in heels, says Sarah. I don't know if I said that in a meaningful way, but anyway, that's what she did. She's in heels. And
She's running in heels.
That's what she's doing.
It, yeah.
We were about halfway there when I realised that we were not alone. Benji was happily running with us. Telling him to go home just made him bark excitedly. Is what I said. And we kept on running.
Is that the dog?
How did you write that?
That's Sarah. By the time we got to the prefabricated classroom where our exam was, Benji came barging in too, running happily around the classroom, saying hello to everyone who's about to take the exam. I sat at a desk, breathing so heavily I was not able to talk. I was knackered. 3 years of cheap student drinks had taken their toll. Benji was in his element and busy making new friends. The invigilator tried to communicate with me, but all I could manage were gasps. He suggested that we put the dog in the toilet until after the exam. I managed a thumbs up. Benji was duly taken to the toilet, the other side of the wall of the classroom, and I heard the door shut. The invigilator came back, handed out the papers. We started the exam. I'm still panting and thinking I'm going to have a heart attack. This is when the howling began. The howling intensified and a disgruntled murmur went around the room. I slipped down my chair. The invigilator was being very nice about it, but then indicated he would go and see to the dog. We then heard frenzied yapping and then an audible "Ouch!" Benji, the little sweet dog, had for some reason taken exception to his treatment and had bitten the man, who came back into the room holding his blooded hand. I slipped further down my chair. The howling recommenced for most of the exam, but he let it go this time. To say I struggled to concentrate in that exam is an understatement. I was not even sure of my name. I was so dehydrated and exhausted. The constant howling was very off-putting. I assumed I'd failed, that the invigilator would probably go out of his way to make sure my paper was marked down. And who could blame him? At the end of the exam, I hung back until the place cleared. I took my belt off and retrieved a very annoyed Benji from the toilet cubicle. Halfway up the road, I bumped into Aaron, whose opening line was, "Why did you take my dog?" At this point, I began whipping him with the other end of my dog lead. This is Aaron, obviously, not the dog. I handed over Benji, who at this stage was now having a great time and seemed very, very pleased with himself. At this point, the Student Union bar was calling, and this is where I bumped into some friends who started talking about how some idiot had brought a dog to an exam. An actual dog in an actual exam? Who would do such a thing? I took solace in my cider and agreed with them. Many months later, at the graduation ball, one of the lecturers started talking about some idiot who'd taken a dog to an exam. People at the ball were still talking about it. To my shame, I still did not admit to the crime. I'm sure the incident must have knocked a few marks from my fellow students' exam results, and I'm very sorry and I seek forgiveness, hoping it did not badly affect their career prospects. I also ask forgiveness from the invigilator for the dog bite. Soz. It was very out of character for poor little Benji. And lastly, obviously, I need forgiveness from Benji, who is up in heaven now, for allowing him to be put in the toilet. And I could just say, obviously, this is the cubicle. He wasn't actually put... Just shut the door.
No, I don't think anyone thought he was in the U-bend.
Well,
no.
Some people might.
Oh, right, okay, he wasn't.
We had enough U-bends. Yes, we don't want any more U-bend stories. Thank you very much indeed. Anyway, interesting. Yes, you turn up for an exam and the dog follows you. What can be done, Sister Rebecca?
That is a hilarious confession. It's the stuff of nightmares, isn't it? You wake up screaming in the night because you had to run 1.5 miles in heels to your exam.
It happens to me
I get
all
that one
the
all
time.
the time. Yeah.
But the thing
I think
is,
it was a history exam.
I do have one question. Why did she run 1.5 miles in heels? That wasn't very practical, was it? But I guess students aren't the most practical of people. I think the thing is that the dog ruined it for everyone else, but it wasn't her fault that Benji followed her all that way.
No, Aaron was pretty careless, I think.
Aaron was careless, and I blame Aaron, actually, for taking the car and not telling her that he'd run the battery down. That's a terrible thing to do. So I don't put any blame on Sarah. You're forgiven.
I bet Matt will blame the Hells Angels. Anyway, what do you think, Sister Bobby?
Well, the thing is, also, I don't blame the dog. I mean, I'm sure what he did is broke up some of the kind of stress that all the students were suffering, kind of one of those things, kind of disturbed all the kind of anxiety, and actually they should have just let him sit by her feet and he would have been fine. Actually shutting him in the toilet made him more anxious and upset.
He was running around...
No, he would have been fine if he'd settled down. Once he said hello to everyone, of course, I said
like
it gets rid of
know.
everyone. I do. I've got one that does that all the time. What I really love, is the invigilator for letting the dog stay and let everyone just sit their exams, because he could have got really... angry about it and not let her sit her exam. So I'm really glad that he did. So, Sarah, you are forgiven. What you're not forgiven for is taking Aaron's distributor cap and hiding it so he could never start his car again. That's what you should have done as payback.
Oh, okay.
So you're forgiven for the dog.
Wow.
New side to Bobby.
That was a really rotten, selfish thing to do. I need to give you some lessons.
I think exam confessions, invigilator confessions, if anyone else has taken their pet to an exam, could be quite interesting. What do you say?
Well,
sister?
yes. I mean, obviously the villain of the piece here is Aaron and his ridiculously running down the battery of the car, and also, what are you doing with a dog at university? What on earth? Oh, Bobby, you took your dog to
could have been a
university.
veterinary student.
No, he's not.
No, he's not.
No, he's
and,
definitely
and,
been,
and anyway, if he were, then that's not
Still
a
don't
happy
take a
end
dog.
for the dog in that.
They do take dogs,
scenario.
actually, vets.
Yeah, right.
stop
Well, I'm going to say he's not. I'm going to say he's just plain weird and shouldn't have been taking his dog to university. So actually, everyone everyone at the university would have gone, oh yeah, it's that weird bloke who brought his dog. That's the reason why there was a dog in the examination hall. But actually, the real problem here is the dog. How's the dog getting into her house and into her bedroom? And when's this dog going to calm down? So actually, I am going to forgive because it's clearly the dog's fault. The dog needs to calm down and stop ruining everyone else's day.
Anyway, here's tonight's tale. It comes from Phil. Thank you very much, Phil, for tonight's story. I'll just say anything that you hear in tonight's confession, don't try it yourself, because, that's not a good thing. Father Simon and the hugely underappreciated collective.
Hurrah! All right. Well
Listening recently to your streaker confession from 1976 takes me back to my own little incident that happened in the same hot summer of millions of ladybirds and tarmac on the roads melting, although I do have to warn you, no nudity is involved. Instant disappointed faces. The confession involves the family summer holiday, or rather, the return journey home. To set the scene, we were a family of 4. My mum and dad, my irritating older sister, and myself. Holidays were usually the only time all 4 of us were in the car at the same time. As in the 70s, cars were only used to transport dad to work, or mum and dad to the one supermarket in the area about 6 miles away, even though we lived in a large town. God forbid cars were used to take the kids to school, even if it was raining, snowing, thick fog, gales. You get the idea. He's not over it, is he?
No, clearly not.
When going on holiday, my sister and I got on together, as it was one of the only times that we got to play Love Bug Tick, or one of the other great in-car games. I don't know how you play that.
No.
Anyone know? Have you played Love Bug Tick?
Is that about sort of ticking a piece of paper every time you see a beetle, a VW?
Could be one of those.
Anyway. Yes, that's definitely
could it be?
isn't it?
All right, that's the one. Anyway,
Kirby the Love Bug, well done.
miles and miles and hours of fun. The journey was about 45 miles. This is our yearly trek to North Wales, which took about 2 hours plus a stop at the halfway house for lemonade and crisps. My sister and I got on very little the rest of the year, as she was 7 years older than me. Her being 17 and in love with all of the Bay City Rollers, Donny Osmond, and all the rest of the pretty boys. And me being a burdensome 10-year-old, as she was my only babysitter. Her idea of fun was to blindfold me and feed me items from the food cupboards, and I had to guess what they were.
It's a great game.
Great, not bad training. Well, can't.
They usually ended up being salt, pepper, brown sauce, mustard, or some disgusting tinned fish. How about that? Surströmming. Very good. What's this? Ah! Her main... I like this, the next sentence. Her main punishment to administer on her Saturday night babysitting duties was to pin me down and fart on my head.
She's not as elegant as we thought then.
No, not really. You get the vibe. This is a brother-sister.
Yeah, I'm liking her.
Sibling
even more.
rivalry story. She was, Father Simon, she was horrible, and apparently I deserved it, as she could be out with her friends, loitering. Anyway, the holiday came and all went well, and after our 2 weeks away, we headed home. You remember that? They're actually off on holiday. Yeah. Now, what I failed to say, Father Simon, is that my dad had recently bought a new second-hand car that had 4 doors rather than our usual 2. This was a novelty for us. Now, this, of course, was before child locks, so we were told very clearly, do not play with the handles. Is this clear? Well, it was very clear. So, we're on our way back home. And at the end of our road is a sharp turn, probably about 100 degrees to the left. So Dad had to slow right down every time he's taking it. And on our way back from holiday, we had to negotiate this turn. And I guess it might be true that Dad wasn't going quite slowly enough. The next thing I saw was a massive grey road about 3 inches from my face as Dad went round this corner and the door had flown open. Luckily, my beautiful best sister in the world saw all this and grabbed the back of my tank top and hauled me back in. Narrow escape, I'm sure you'll agree. My rather cross mum made Dad change his new cherished faulty car for another that had 2 doors so it couldn't throw children out randomly. What a palaver. Dad, as you can imagine, was not pleased, but you can't argue with a randomly violent family saloon. So the Vauxhall Viva was back. So, nearly 40 years later, I'm now seeking forgiveness, as I never actually ever told anyone until now that I think actually I was the reason that the door flew open, and was probably guilty of fiddling with the handle just a little bit, because it was a novelty and I hadn't had a handle in the back before, and so I was just doing that, and I was leaning against the handle, and then it kind of opened. So it was my fault, not the car's, and I never said anything until now. Clearly I need forgiveness from a family, and especially my dad, for denying them the joys of four-door travel. We were stuck with the two. Well, Phil, thank you very much indeed. Just as well, your beautiful best sister in the world was sharp on the reflexes, grabbed you by the tank top and hauled you back in, even though her favourite thing was to
Do that.
break wind on your head. You know, up and down the country, people were going, my sister did that.
Yeah.
My brother did that. That's the way it goes. Sibling rivalry confessions, always very good. confessions@bbc.co.uk. Sister Rebecca,
That's quite a revelation after 40 years, isn't it, to come out with that after all that time.
Dad, you
of
didn't
letting
need
his
to trade the car in.
Yeah.
It was me having a fiddle with the handle.
I mean, that is quite something. I think, well, he was lucky, and obviously he wasn't wearing a seatbelt different times.
Different times, no seatbelts,
No
no
seatbelts at the back, especially, and good on his sister for saving him. I think, actually, it probably just made him realise that even though he really thought he hated his sister, they loved each other, really. So good came out of it, and actually, I can't forgive, because he shouldn't have been fiddling with the door.
Well,
So...
okay.
And they got rid of the car, and they were probably pretty gutted about it.
Okay.
So I'm not forgiving.
Harsh but fair. Let's see what the novice makes of it all.
I'd love to know how he got his revenge when he grew on his sister. Because
Well, I think
obviously
he's
he would have
feeling,
become bigger.
he's feeling guilty now.
Yeah, well, he must have done something pretty terrible to her eventually. Yeah, I mean, that's what you do as a 10-year-old boy. You fiddle with things, don't you? I mean, doors and window locks and all
Yeah,
these type of
thanks.
things. And he also, for years of flatulence-induced headaches, I absolutely, Phil, I have to forgive you.
Okay, well, it's 1-1. Here comes Brother Matthew.
Elder siblings are always the most fun. That's what I think we've always learned from these confessions, particularly after her little form of punishment there, which is excellent, which is going to live with me for a little while. I think they were going to get a new car anyway. It was coming. I mean, there's probably this car with the door. They probably knew that it was him, that it was fiddling with the back door, and that it wasn't really that the door was falling off. So they were always going to get a new car. So I don't think there's anything to forgive here. I think this was just nature taking its course.
They were this week's confessions. Pretty good, I think. Did you forgive anyone? Were you quite harsh this week? If you have your own shadowy secret, and let's be honest, you got at least half a dozen which you haven't told us. confessions@bbc.co.uk, that's where you send it to. So more terrible tales in a week, and if you missed our guest this week, that's J.K. Rowling on Monday. I mean, yes, did you not read about that? Joanne Rowling, a.k.a. Robert Galbraith, was here on Monday. David Attenborough was here on Tuesday. The Paul Weller session's there on Wednesday. If you want any of those, you go to iPlayer. You can enjoy all these delights at your leisure. You can download entire shows and keep them and treasure them and stroke them for a month. So that's J.K. Rowling and David Attenborough and Paul Weller. Thank you very much. Oh, and Nigel, of course, doing his food on Thursday. So thanks for listening. More confessions next week.